So now we have Patrick McMullen presenting the con side.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Lisa. So I'm the naysayer. I want to start by presenting the problem in a little bit of a different way than Lisa did. I always need to see things graphically, and I need them to be as simple as possible. So this was how read across was originally explained to me. And I think it distills it into its essence. Probably not, but. So this is how I generally think. You know, we have some endpoint of interest and measurements of a compound, two compounds with regard to that endpoint of interest, source A, source B. We have some target that along some axis of chemical similarity, in this case, chain length, that we're trying to guess at what the outcome would be. So you interpolate some way and make the inferred value. As Lisa was saying, this is pretty well accepted practice, especially in Europe. What we're talking about here is a little bit different. We're talking about developing a bridging strategy where we have in vivo endpoints on, on one side of the kind of chemical space continuum, but not the other side, and we're talking about using high throughput screening endpoints, in this case ToxCast, to make that bridge. So as I see it, there's four challenges in this that prevent us from using this in a quantitative way. And I'm going to go through these one by one. Challenges in establishing structural similarity, risks of extrapolating outside the domain of applicability, which I'll explain what I mean by that, ADME considerations, and an unclear relationship between these ToxCast assay endpoints and the adverse effect we're trying to approximate here. So one thing that Lisa kind of glossed over quickly, although some of her slides highlighted it, is that in the real world, alkophenols are mixtures of branched isomers, each of which has a pretty poorly characterized physical chemical properties and toxicological properties. These haven't necessarily been described fully, but I want to make a comparison to the phthalate literature where this has been described more completely, where you have different manufacturing processes that produce mixtures of phthalates, in this case diisononyl phthalate, with very different composition properties and very different physical chemical properties. And my argument is that the composition of these mixtures is going to vary substantially, and so are the resulting toxicological properties of those mixtures. So if you take nothing away from this, I hope that you take away a new geometry term. We talk a lot in my world in vitro extrapolation about the parallelogram approach. What we really have here is something more high dimensional than that, a parallelepiped approach, where we have axes that where we're trying to extrapolate across whether you have a mixture, various mixtures, purified components, extrapolating across chain length, and then in vitro versus in vivo. And I should mention here that there's another axis that I left off, which is the species extrapolation, which this was the limit of my artistic, I guess, of the universe in reality. It's hard to make a four-dimensional thing and show it here. So as I was saying, I was making the argument that the chemical properties and the toxicological properties are going to vary substantially based on chain length, based on composition. We do have some evidence of that. So these are properties that were tabulated in the report that Lisa was talking about, the recent NAS report. And what they show here is the lipophilicity. And these are estimates. These aren't measured values. But what I want you to notice is that the kind of what I'll call the mid-chain length, the octyl and the nonal phenols have a lipophilicity that's more than 100-fold less than dodecylphenol. So what does that mean in the context of the chemical universe? So I took, and these values differ a little bit because the estimation was done differently, but this is the entirety of the CIRAP chemical universe, 55,000 chemicals. And what I've plotted here is a histogram of their partition coefficients. So that's in red here in the background. And what we see is that the octyl and nonal phenols cluster very tightly around a log P of 5. Dodecylphenol is substantially higher than that. Not only is it different by a couple orders of magnitude, but it's also pretty far in the tail of this distribution, which is going to pose problems for interpreting the concentrations that you are delivering in an in vitro context. So I want to borrow a concept from the QSAR field, and that's structural activity relationships. So Kansas is very flat. Bryce Canyon is very not flat. You could conceive of taking a walk in this field with your eyes shut, just breeze, sun on your face. You wouldn't want that same experience here. Similarly, the landscape of the structure activity, which is the mapping between what here the X space, which is the kind of structural features. Here you can think of it as chain length, and the Y space, which is some phenotype, either a chemical property or the toxicity of that compound. If this is very flat, that's a very easy thing to approximate, and the read-across argument is easy. If this is Bryce Canyon, it means having information on the octyl and nonal phenols doesn't give you any information on what the dodecylphenol is going to do. So and the reason that is relevant here is because it has such a large difference in predicted physicochemical property. Something didn't show up there. So the third point I want to make, which is related to those chemical properties, is we're not taking any consideration here into toxicokinetics. So there's a 100-fold difference in lipophilicity. That's going to have a lot of impact on serum binding, uptake, metabolism. There's some data on this which you aren't going to be able to see here. But what this would have shown is data on basically the transport of nonal phenols out of the liver, and not just nonal phenols, the other chain lengths as well. And what you would see is there's essentially no transport of there's much less transport of the higher chain lengths than there is of the shorter chain length. So the last point that I want to make is this is data that Lisa showed. I'm going to discuss it in a slightly different way. What I'm going to call an unclear relationship between unclear quantitative relationship between the ToxCast assays and the adverse endpoints of interest. So what I'm showing here is these are ToxCast assays that were active, where they could actually calculate an AC50 for nonal phenol and dodecylphenol. And each dot here, AC50 on the horizontal, and the scaled top of curve, you can think of it as the extent of the effect on the vertical axis. So what I want you to appreciate here is how tightly these cluster around what is effectively the cytotoxicity limit. For the nonylphenol, they spread out a little bit more for the dodecaphenol, but we're still within a standard deviation of activity of these, basically the battery of estrogen receptor assays that from the Judson study that Judson model that Lisa was discussing, and the cytotoxicity limits. So contrast this with endogenous estrogens. So ethinyl estradiol has an AC50 in the picomolar range. So we're talking orders of magnitude away from the cytotoxicity limit, whereas we're right up against the limit in the case of the alkyl phenols. So why is this important? To me, this says that we have a lot less specificity in understanding what the mode of action is based on the ToxCast assays, because we are activating other endpoints that are not specific at about the same concentration. So these are the 4 points that I made here. There's some challenges in establishing structural similarity. I talked about the dangers of extrapolating outside the domain of applicability, ADME considerations, and the unclear quantitative relationship between in vitro and the adverse endpoint. And what this means is not that these in vitro assays are valueless, but that we have to be careful about how we interpret them and build them into a regulatory framework. And practically, what that means is uncertainty factors that are so extreme that any risk assessment that we base this on is going to be essentially valueless. Just to wrap up, I'd like to I'd like to integrate a couple concepts. I want to come back to Gary's question in his introduction talk about how many universes there are, and I want to answer that in the context of understanding uncertainty about our science. And I would say that there's at least 2. One where you could use this data to make a risk assessment about alkyl phenols, and this one. So, thanks.